Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of The Game Changers. I'm your host, Carla, for tonight, and featuring Says Me, aka Rich, whose expertise and knowledge will provide valuable insights. We will engage in thought provoking discussions on various topics, so stay tuned for an enlightening show. I would like to express my gratitude to Evan, Iggy, JC, and the TSA team for their support in creating this platform for meaningful conversations with leaders and innovators in our community. Join me as I explore the stories and insight of our guests, especially in the realm of fantasy football. The Game Changers foster a unique community, and I'm privileged to share this journey with all of you this evening. Rich, the ultimate sports maverick and analytic mind. With a career that spans the fast paced arenas of both sports and medical device industries, Rich is a multifaceted content creator, sports analyst, and executive. As a seasoned professional in NFL history, sports analytic and fantasy football, Rich brings in deep knowledge and captivating insights to every discussion. As the creative force behind the GOAT RB video series on YouTube, Rich delves into the legacies of the greatest running backs in NFL history. His expertise shines in his role as a sports writer and fantasy football analyst with Blitz Sports Media, where he breaks down complex sports analytics into engaging, digestible content for fans and enthusiasts. Rich's expertise portfolio extends to his former career as a sole proprietor in the sports business. He produced MMA events, was a licensed matchmaker with the Nevada Athletic Commission, and lent his voice as a color commentator on DVD and Comcast Sportsnet Chicago. Rich has also played pivotal roles such as USA Shooto Executive Coordinator and US Commissioner, and AV Coordinator for Events, showcasing his versatility in various capacities. His prowess isn't limited to the sports realm. He has also excelled as an director of quality in the medical device industry, certified in Lean and Sigma, as well
Excellent.
as data management. Rich has led business intelligence initiatives and performed analytic projects, demonstrating his analytic acumen and leadership skills. Join me on this podcast tonight as he combines his vast expertise, analytic mind, and passion for sports to bring you captivating discussions, intriguing insight, and behind the scenes stories that only a seasoned insider could offer. Rich, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you too. I'm so happy that you accept to come on the show. It's such an honor. And to read your bio, and I'm just like in shock. You have so much stuff that you have done through the years that makes you a goat, like a lot of people are saying. It's just amazing to to get to know the person behind the picture. Thank you for coming tonight, Rich.
Thank you.
So let's start with your career journey. You've had a unique career trajectory that spans both sports and medical device industry. Can you
Right.
share the key moments that led you to into each field and what motivated those transitions?
Yeah. So going through my youth, I was deeply into science, and I spent most of my middle school and high school years delving into biochemistry, physics. The physical sciences, natural sciences, and so that led me off into school for biology with a minor in chemistry. So, the part where that contributes to where I am today is it got me into the scientific method. The process of using the kind of stats and analytics that I do today is based on using the principles of the scientific method. Form a hypothesis, come up with a test scenarios, test your ideas, see if the data holds up. If it does, or if it doesn't, how can you continue to test it with different modeling, different data. So early on in my life, not knowing I'd continue into this path, I was working the first steps that would get me towards my sort of analytical approach to my work and to sports. Of course, the biology naturally led me into pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies. I got heavily involved into quality areas of quality assurance, which deals with both compliance as well as optimization, process improvement, design control, and that's where I continue to develop my background with data sets and analytics. So that was kind of sort of the early phase of what I did. In the meantime, I spent a lot of my life playing football all the way up through high school. Was recruited into D3. I didn't continue on that path, but it was very close. My favorite sport of all time is definitely football, but it was also a lifelong martial artist. And so while I was in college, I started delving into the mixed martial arts frame, and that's where I got into the sports business. Started as a competitor. If anybody's a MMA fan, you can check out SureDog.com, and you can see that I've got a listing there. But when you go 0-4 as a fighter, you'll learn to get involved behind the scenes. So that's what I did from there. So I spent a lot of time working with production teams, getting into ringside interviews, backstage interviews, jack of all trades, whatever I can get. This was late 90s, early 2000s when it was just kind of taking off. So it gave me a chance to kind of learn the sports scene, and you get to network, you get to know people. Ran a show in Las Vegas, like I mentioned. I was licensed with the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity to work with people like Chuck Liddell, get his fighters onto the card. Really understood, where the buck stops. It stops with me, and it kind of got me this sort of a little bit of ambition and hands-on involvement in things. So I continued my career with medical device. That was the main way to pay the bills. But I was pursuing this sort of sports approach for quite a few years. So eventually that subsided. I stepped out of MMA probably back in 2012. Um, but still been with football the whole way, continuing to develop my grasp on data science, especially with my Six Sigma certification that I obtained. That you delved heavily into theoretical, hypothetical test of means, all kinds of use of data sets. So that just sort of kept me moving forward into this direction.
That's amazing story. Wow. I can't believe you did all of this in like no time.
Well, I got
So
quite a bit of gray hair that kind of explains that runway of time there.
gray hair means knowledge. Like
Maybe
I
that's
cover a lot. I cover a lot. That's amazing. I love that. I love hearing your story. So tell me a little bit about your NFL history. As an expert in NFL history, what's one of the most surprising or lesser known stories about the league that fans might not be aware of?
Well, something that I try to do, and I come from a place calling myself a historian because I've been watching football since the '70s, and even at that time I was studying the sport coming out of the '50s and '60s. Stacks of Sports Illustrated, all kinds of old content, and I've always delved into it. I've always wanted to know more, and I especially appreciated the things that came before me. So then, watching football over the decades, I've got that rooted background to when I was a kid watching football, taking it all in, as well as the way I studied it. So some of the content that I want to make sure I include in my contribution is I'm touching on things like what I call NFL firsts and also an MVP breakdown, kind of taking us through the history of the MVP awards. It lets you take a look at the 60s, take a look at the 70s, what was going on then, who were the big players, what were the big moments, as well as the NFL firsts, novel events in history that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of or they overlook. Even some of the more modern stuff, like the Denver Broncos being the only team in history to have a 600-point season. That's a little more recent. I think it was 2013, but let's bring it up. Let's talk about it. Let's remember it. Let's understand the significance of that. The who was the first guy to get 1,000-yard, or excuse me, 1,000 points. Lou Groza from Cleveland Browns. He was a field goal kicker. You know, hey, did you know that? So those are fun things I want to make sure I'm sharing with readers that reach back into the history of the game and let them kind of connect with it. It's very common for people to forget what was in the past, but also sort of, I don't know, discount it. It's all that's past, and it's in earlier days. It's not as good as it is today. So that's not the point. It's all special, all of it, everything today, everything from yesteryear. It's football. I love football. I love its history. So I want to make sure it's kind of out in front of people.
I love that you're talking history. I love history myself. But I feel with the word going fast nowadays,
Yeah.
people don't want to sit and read about anything, or like they just want to come over and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, I'm done. So people like you are not given like what they need to be given because they work history. So what's your intake on that, Rich?
Yeah. No, I agree. This is, you hear it all the time, from marketing perspectives and the kind of studies that go into those with product management, new product introduction. You got 3 to 7 seconds to catch their attention. And if you don't get it, they're moving on. So I understand that you got to be able to present something, get it out in front of them, give them some keywords, something that's going to grab their attention. It's not always easy to do when you're trying to present some kind of novel idea. Like, I remember when I finally got the blue check mark on X, that gives me a chance to expand my article and kind of give a little more. But
Yes.
there, to an extent, it was actually maybe a little more beneficial before that, because I was forced to make much more succinct breakdowns and give little bite-sized pieces. So that may have been, easier for people to kind of take in some key points. But so what I try to do is that the first 280 characters get something really appealing and interesting, a call out, a name they recognize, and then hopefully elaborate down deeper. And that's kind of the benefit of X. I can get on there, share posts every day, every other day, give as much detail as I want. And I think progressively, it's catching on, and people are interested. Will tune in, and but then I can also participate in other people's conversations as well. So it's really a great format to do what I'm doing. To kind of get into the conversation, share some of my passions and interests, but participate with others as well.
That's awesome. As we do, and I'm a teacher, so we have the hook. We need to hook people first and then go forward. So I like that. So tell me a little bit about the name, Says Me. Why that name?
Well, I got a lot of opinions. So, I various topics. I'm big into science fiction,
Okay.
fantasy film. I like, sports, obviously, politics, um, history, entertainment, things like television shows. So I like to talk and noodle on things and give my opinion. So, and one of my key phrases is like, look, if we're just going to go off opinion, I'll use mine. So, this is the best
I love
thing, says me. So that's why I do the data sets and the sports analytics, because, you know, even like I've said this in my video when I did the GOAT running back video series. I'm like, even though I'm trying to, I'm using data and trying to make it as sort of objective and data driven as possible, there's still a good dose of subjectivity in the mix. I chose the categories that I was assessing. I chose which data to put into the analysis. I chose 40 running backs to analyze. That was all my choice. So you can never escape that level of personal view on all of these things and some subjectivity. So that being the case, you're going to get the best I can, and it's going to be what I have to say. It's says me.
So says me. Well, that's a perfect name for you then. So, sports analytics has transformed how we view and understand games. Can you explain how you use analytics to break down player performance and team dynamics?
Yeah, and it's really important to understand what analytics means. Analytics isn't the data itself, right? There's
Yes.
stats, there's metrics, there's complicated ways to combine those. But the point of analytics is to say, okay, let me form a hypothesis or let me ask a question, and then go grab whichever data you think might provide the information you need. Because data is just data, but when you combine it, review it, look at it over time, stratify it in different ways, then you can start to turn it into information. And that process of using the data, drawing the conclusions, that's the analytics.
Yes.
Um, so so the it's a data rich environment out there, sport, especially football, probably since what, 2018 they started to added more and more advanced metrics. You've got a lot of resources like Football Outsiders, PFF. There's a lot of places to get interesting data that you can compile and put together again that analysis to say, hey, let's answer a question. Because again, if people just want to say, I think so and so's the best, well, okay, that's opinion, that's fine. What's behind it? Is he the best? What do we care about to call them the best? So let's pull that data together. Let's look at it and think about it. And there's no universal truth here, but it's, can we at least get onto a common ground to understand one another with some fact based analysis?
That's amazing. I love that. Tell me a little bit about your GOAT RB video series on YouTube. It has
Yeah.
been
So
quite popular. So, what
yeah.
inspired you to start this series, and what criteria do you use to evaluate the greatest running backs?
So there's a couple of steps to how that came together. First of all, it was yeah, I live in the Chicagoland. I'm from the South Side,
We
and I
have
grew up.
lots of people from Chicago, so
Well, everybody, all right. So I was actually born on the West Side, grew up in the Southwest Side. I live on the South Side now. Chicagoland my whole life. So I grew up watching '70s and '80s Chicago Bears, and so I knew as a young fan knew that Walter Payton was the greatest running back.
uh-huh.
But I understand that's my fanboy in me. Of course, I think that. So over the years, there's been great running backs along the way. Barry Sanders, Emmett Smith, Ladainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson. List goes on. So, and everyone's using what I call recency bias to determine who's the best. But certain names still persist. Jim Brown, O.J. Simpson, Franco Harris. They persist in the conversation as well. So I'm like, you know what? I want to see if I can answer this question: who really is the greatest? And I got the inspiration for the categories from another video that's on YouTube, very popular, called Goat Goat comparison. It's for basketball. Michael Jordan against LeBron James. It's probably about 4 years old
Oh,
at this point, but it's a really good analysis. It's got 5 categories that inspired the categories I used for my analysis. Um, and so I went off of his video, kind of his approach, how he thought about it. It's called Danger Productions. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, you really ought to check it out.
I will.
Um, and um, I don't have any affiliation, don't know him. I just know it's a great video, and it kind of drove my thought process. So I built a spreadsheet, pulled the data together, put together some different graphs and charts, and had to build some custom metrics in order to really answer the questions that I wanted to answer. I did something a little different than what Danger Productions did. It was maybe a little more ill-advised, as I decided to go big with 40 running backs in the analysis. He was just comparing 2 people. But I'm like, hey, this is just for me. That's what my thought was. Just for me. I'm going to see who belongs in this analysis and who comes out ahead in a comparative breakdown. So as I was doing it, I was pleasantly surprised to see, like, wow, Walter Payton is coming out pretty good in this analysis. So I remember telling my nephew, I'm like, if this doesn't turn out favorable, I'm just going to bury it and go away. No one's ever going to see it. It's just for me. But since it started to bear out some numbers that kind of really made sense to me, and it really looked good, and it was favorable to my argument, I I said, you know what? This isn't just going to be a spreadsheet that I've got to play with. I want to maybe get this out into a video, my opus. Just and the thought was, I get the videos out and I'm done. Never done video content. I've never done YouTube, any social media, so it took me quite a while to produce these videos. But yeah, wrote a script, did some graphics, broke it down, and so it felt good. Got it out there, finished the videos, and so then I'm like, well, I want people to know about it. So that's what kind of drove me to step into X and say, well, maybe I'll go on X and plug it a few times. And then it just sort of it's a great community, the football community, the fantasy football community, and so I got swept up in it. I met some great people who I interact with, and so I've been happy to kind of plug and promo my videos, but then start creating some continuous content on X as well, and just sort of staking out this place in the social media sphere. It's still early. I'm not a professional or not really good at it, but I think the content I got is interesting, and I hope people enjoy it. So I'm gonna kind of keep moving from there.
That's amazing. So I'm mesmerized with all the stories that you're sharing, Rich. And why you ask me, why me, when I ask you to come on the show? With everything that you have, with all the knowledge, we didn't go through a lot yet, but like this is part of the knowledge that you know. Why you ask me why me?
I
I want
guess
to know.
yeah, because I looked at that and I'm like, well, I'm fairly like I mentioned, I'm fairly new with the social media, approach. Don't have a big background. Other than what is on X, I'm not a known commodity with a lot of popularity. So I looked at who you had. You had a sports doctor on in the video that you showed me when you invited me on, and I'm like, well, geez, this guy's a doctor dedicated to sports medicine. That's what he does. Whereas I'm kind of dabbling or approaching getting into kind of sports identity, sports content. So I viewed myself much as an amateur compared to a professional you had on before. That was the driver behind my comment. Like, you sure you want to talk to me? I'm just getting started here. I appreciate that you saw my content and that you thought it was interesting, and I try to do it in a professional context, even though it's not my current career. So I do appreciate that you saw something worth talking about. So thank you very
No,
much.
the honor is mine, Rich. I'm serious. Like when you send me the bio, like heads hands down. I'm honest. I cannot wait to know more and more about you right now.
All right.
So, as a fantasy football analyst, what's your top piece of advice for someone new to fantasy football? Any common mistakes to avoid?
Well, it's easy to go for your favorite team, your favorite players. You got to put that aside. This, fantasy football is even more just purely analytical. If you're watching football and enjoying it, unless you're doing sports betting, that's a different question. But if you're watching football, enjoy it. Pick your home team, pick your favorite team, root for them. Nothing wrong with that. But when fantasy football, you've got to separate that. That you're not picking a team, you're picking individual players, and you've got to separate yourself from the bias or the hopes or anything like that. And there's tons of resources out there for data. A lot of the apps that you go on to play fantasy football, they've got tons of data and information. There's a wealth of content creators who are putting together their breakdowns. So I've gotten on Blitz Sports Media. Shout out to Ryan and for inviting me on and being a part of his path.
Yeah.
Um, so that I got on there, was putting just general content out, and then he said, hey, look, you're doing all this data crunching, you'll probably be pretty good at doing wide receivers. So I said, all right, let me start building out, start with a spreadsheet, kind of build a data set. How do I want this to work? So that way I'm giving a taste of all the receivers that everyone who's active, who they're going to be playing next week, how does that defense affect their potential results. So we're putting out the content on Blitz Sports Media. There's podcasts, there's other websites. There's just go if you're out there playing fantasy football, put your bias aside, forget who your favorite players are, your favorite team, go to the data, just people who are passionate about this, who want to share, their take on where the big value is for fantasy, take advantage of it. So that's definitely something I think that newer fantasy players, even old fantasy players who still maybe get hooked up in that sort of personal approach to it. You gotta use the data, and it'll really make a difference.
I'll always pick Mahomes. I can't. Sorry, Rich.
Yeah, I noticed the KC. Well, here's the thing. If you're a Kansas City fan, being a Kansas City fan and a Mahomes fan is beneficial to you
True.
because you can pick your favorite, and that's that. Granted, he didn't have such a great production year this year, but
Yep,
obviously he's getting the results, and the team
agreed.
has been fantastic.
Well, we hope for third win. Let's see how it's gonna go. They're playing the Bills soon.
Yeah,
We'll figure out.
it'll be exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's gonna be an exciting game. With the MMA event productions, you had an extensive experience in MMA event production and
Yeah.
as a licensed matchmaker. I want to learn more about that.
All
So
right.
what are some of the behind the scene challenges of organizing MMA events that fans might not realize?
Well, in the time I was really active at that frame, it was like early 2000s, middle 2000s, and the sport was still on the rise. And I worked with a couple of great people out of an event that was called Hook and Shoot, Ironheart Crown, kind of Midwest scene of MMA. And again, since we were on the rise, trying to get DVDs out, looking for TV contracts, the the uh, the effort to put together a card. People are eager to get fights, but we weren't paying big dollars. So if they had to back out, it was easy for them to back out because there wasn't a huge payday with it. So if you're trying to manage a small scale event, putting together cards, and you're trying to get people from maybe exciting gyms who've got big names, that way maybe that big name will come and be at the ringside. So that was always an effort to try and put together a card, a lineup that used fighters, even entry level fighters, but from the big fight schools and fight clubs, so that you can kind of attach yourself to that. But the turnover on the card was brutal. People having to back out, they got injured, they had a better offer, all kinds of stuff like that. So that was probably the biggest challenge, at least in the early days, of trying to put something together. The flip side, if you do start to get some momentum and maybe you get a DVD deal or a distribution deal, because I worked with a company in Japan, and
Wow.
we would distribute our events into the Japanese programming. So now suddenly fighters wanted to be involved, and so now you've got to manage those expectations, who you can use, how many cards do you have available.
Yep.
Um, so it was an interesting time, and it played into my sports gene and my data gene, because I then, as a commissioner, I ran the
Yes.
way the way that I structured the way that we quantify the rankings. It wasn't just like a media rankings. It was actually based on who did you beat, what was their ranking at the time you beat them. You get points for that, and so rankings would adjust based on essentially like strength of schedule in football or basketball.
Oh wow, that's awesome. You've done color commentary and sports journalism. How do you approach preparing for a broadcast or an interview like this one tonight to ensure it's informative and engaging?
Yeah. Um, I think I benefit, well, believe it or not, the science part of my career, my education, and even in the companies I've worked at, report writing and putting together conclusions, whether you're reporting to the FDA or to the boss, or just having to put something on file that represents your product's stability, things like that. Writing really detailed technical reports doing, researching the information, make sure it's prepared. That kind of fed into like the way I think. And if we got hit by the FDA on an issue, you'd have to do a deep dive, do root cause analysis, then come up with a detailed report. So that kind of helped, I think, the way I can think and talk quickly, if you will. Um, it also kind of helps me with spin, kind of bullshitting my way through some stuff. So that kind of played into as I helped expand my vocabulary. It helped me kind of feel comfortable. If I'm talking to somebody in upper management or if I'm talking with FDA, I'm comfortable having those conversations and talking casually. So when I got the opportunity to do DVDs, to be on television, to talk with you, um, just I just like to, I like to talk. It's like I said, everyone's got an opinion, and I'm no different.
That's
So
me.
there it is. Yeah.
That's awesome. I can't believe how rich your life is,
Mhm.
literally. Like you're talking about the medical device industry right now. So transitioning from to the medical device industry, what have been some of the biggest challenges and successes you've encountered as an executive director of quality?
Oh well, I worked at a company for 11 years, and you build a lot of relationships. And to me, that was the
Yes.
best part of the work I did, was the people I worked with. When I was a kid, my old man, he worked in the trucking industry. And he worked on the
Mhm.
dock loading trucks, union guy. He worked for 35 years at his place of employment. So I thought that's the way it works. People find a job and they work there for decades. Well, I come out of college, and suddenly there's people that are job hopping, trading up on careers. And I was like, wow, this is different. This isn't what I was familiar with from my youth. So then I
Yes.
landed at this one company, and I was there for 11 years, people around me were there for 20, 30, 40 years. And I said, here's a place. Here's a place that I can settle in and be a part of. So that was a great experience, getting to know people, working with people. I value them above all the other things. Because as a matter of fact, my line of work with the medical device industry is quality assurance. You're really into process management and how processes govern things, but processes don't do anything by themselves. You need to have people to execute them. And so I learned to put people first. That's the most important part of any business from my experience. So then
Right.
moving out, when I had to move off from that company, things changed. It was really hard to kind of move on from the people I worked with. Management was easy to move on from, but I missed the people. So I landed at a new company. It's a startup, and small, and everybody's all hands in, got to get things done. And so again, building those relationships because you count on each other. Um, that's been the best part of my career in medical device. It's very technical, and I've learned Six Sigma and data management and all kinds of technical aspects of my career and my development, my knowledge base. So those are all very, very valuable. But the thing that meant the most to me has been the people.
So, how has your certification in Lean and Six Sigma influenced your approach to both your sports related projects and your work in the medical device industry?
Yeah, so I mean, the easy part is, medical device. If you're producing a lot of units that have precision requirements, you need to monitor data performance. So in other words, if your equipment is churning out a cut piece of metal, you've got certain tolerances. You've got a percentage of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And so that's to make sure you're getting good units out, but also monitoring how often are you getting defectives, because defectives have a risk to go out to a customer, but they also are costing the company money. So you use what's called CPK analysis to understand what's the capability of your process, narrow it down, and it's using these kinds of approaches, especially with control charts and hypothetical test and means, that has fed into how I think about the data in the sports analytics.
Yes.
Because if I'm comparing two populations of products I've produced to look and see if there's a statistically significant difference, I could do that same analysis with two running backs or two teams. Let me look at their outcome or outputs over time. or across their entire, lifetime, compare that either to an earlier version of themselves or maybe to another team. And you can use these same methodologies to do those, test those theories and those ideas, look for trends and in the data that's available with sports. So Six Sigma, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it's Six Sigma is six standard deviations away from, well, it's actually three, plus or minus three standard deviations around the mean, the average. So if you can get all your data within Six Sigma, you're going to have a very high quality
Wow.
operation. So you get down to really, really fine precision. I find it difficult to get that level of precision in sports data, but I don't think precision is as important. I'm always looking for accuracy, and in
Yeah.
statistical terms, accuracy and precision are specific things, and they're different things. So these are the things that feed into how I look at data and what's important. Like, this information doesn't tell us what I want to know. Let me sweep it aside. Let me look for some different data that does answer the question and go from there.
I mean, with medical, it's more of the things. With sports, it's more of the person. So you never know sometimes if someone is gonna be injured or not injured, and everything get like all over the place, messed up. I have
Well,
a couple of people saying some stuff here. You want to say
awesome.
something before?
Oh, I was just going to mention, the one of the big differences if you're
Yeah.
analyzing data on medical device, you've got a controlled environment. If you're doing data analysis on an NFL football season, that is got so many variables, it's completely uncontrolled. And
I
so that's
agree.
why you can't really get the kind of precision on a football analysis. You can only get sort of broad indicators, and then you've got to use the eye test, and you've got to use, make a lot of inferences and continue to test the data.
Yeah,
But
I agree 100%. I don't play fantasy football, but I watch what's going on and I'm like, nope, nope, I'm good. So I'm fine with that. Sniper Mel have a question for you. She's
sure.
asking what types of medical devices?
Mhm. So my current field, I've been with the company about 5 months, and we're developing a novel device. It's new to the industry. And if you've been in a hospital, like I actually had a heart attack last year, and so I
Oh, so
remember
sorry.
spending time with those little EKG or ECG
EEG. Yeah,
probes that they attach to you. So those have wires and they go off to a big unit.
I
So
have
we're
one
developing.
inserted.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we're trying to eliminate the need for the ECG probes that have a wire, and you wear a central unit on your chest, and it's Bluetooth
Yes.
enabled, wireless communication. So then one for the finger for the pulse ox. So this kind of wireless technology can be used obviously in the hospital. It's being used by pharmaceutical companies to do their clinical trials on their drugs.
Yeah.
So clinical trial participants can wear the unit and get a constant source of data instead of like daily visits to take some vitals. So it's really helping the quality of data and information that's available in the hospital to the research companies, things like that.
Yeah, I'm part of it, so I know what you're talking about. Uh, Fantasy Dog is saying that his brother is huge in medical, six
Mm,
U.S. patents, and last
mm,
time he checked, he has his own AI site.
really?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe you should connect.
Yeah, yeah. Because yeah, like I said, I'm with a startup company now, so it's actually pretty interesting how a novel idea can turn into something major.
Yeah. And Royal State, I don't know if you can read whatever JC is putting. He can relate to missing the people. He missed being a firefighter, and he doesn't miss the other stuff, but he missed the people definitely. So thank you for your service, Royal. I thank
Yeah,
you for that.
yes. Thank you.
So let's go back to our I'm gonna talk a little bit about the GOAT RB series. uh,
Yes.
what are the biggest challenges you have faced in creating that? And
Mhm.
how have you overcome everything that you went through to create the GOAT RB series?
The biggest challenge, it was kind of the funnest though, was I wanted to do two things. One, build something like PER in basketball, if you're familiar with that, um, player efficiency rating, where it kind of consolidates a bunch of key metrics into one solid metric.
Yeah.
So I'm like, football doesn't have that. There's passer rating for quarterbacks, but it's focused around passing. There's QBR, but the metric is itself is invisible to us because it's proprietary. So I'm like, all right, I need something that quantifies a quarterback or running backs, maybe running back in this case, running back's performance, looking at play volume, ball security, production in terms of yards, whether it be from rushing, receiving, passing, as well as the touchdowns from all those sources as well. So how do I consolidate something that factors in all of that? So I'm like, let me go to work here. Let me see what's available because there's an interesting metric called adjusted net yards per attempt that's used for quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And that metric quantifies the value of a touchdown and of a interception in in uh, in yardage value. So an interception is worth like 45 yards and a touchdown's worth 20 yards. So I'm like, all right, how do
Yes.
we get to that? How do we derive that? So I did the research and found a couple of sources, and it's in the videos. It talks about statistical thinking in sports and the hidden game of football, where they've modeled the the point value of a yard, or vice versa, the yardage value of a point. And so
Yes.
now you can say, hey, if they score a touchdown, I can turn that into yardage, and now I can combine that with their actual yardage to see what's their kind of total contribution. So studying that, learning, understanding how that works, I built a custom metric called offensive production score, and divide it by the number of games played, so it's offensive production score per game. So that's a player efficiency metric that I was looking for, and so I built that out for one of my videos. And then the next video that I produced, I'm like, all right, so I can tell how a guy produces individually, but how is that contributing to a team's results? So what's the level of impact that performance has on the team? So the
Yeah.
impact metric was there's nothing. So I'm like, all right. So I spent probably about maybe a month and a half or so figuring out testing how to build this metric. And and it's on the video. I'll give it a plug. My volume 4, the impact rating. I kind of show it on there. It's I wish I should have counted how many different variables are in there, but it's probably 24 different variables that go into this calculation, and it's very complex. And one of the reasons is because running backs from back in the early 2000s, the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, the data available is limited. So you've got to use data that's universal for all the running backs, cross-reference it with other data to get
Yeah.
certain values, setting ranges. So it took me quite a while to kind of build that out and test it. And I think it's a really good metric. It holds up. Again, it's hard to speak to its precision because I haven't done what's called an MSA on that data set, but I'm like, the precision might be a little rough. I don't know, but the accuracy, I think it's a really, really strong indicator directionally of the impact that each running back has provided to their team on a seasonal basis. And in a way that it kind of bears out, that I think is really, really a sign that it's got some validity, is that the running backs who've played on really strong teams, the Emmitt Smiths who played with a dynasty in the early 90s, Tony
Yeah.
Dorsett, um, Terrell Davis played with such a strong Broncos team in around the late 90s. Those guys, actually their impact rating came out a bit on the lower side because they had such a strong quarterback, such a strong line quality, such a
Yeah.
strong defense. And so that factors in, and the strength of their offense, strength of their defense. And I didn't build it with the data yet. I built it conceptually, and then when I plugged in the data and I saw how Franco Harris came out pretty low on the impact rating, because even though he's a great running back, performed well, his efficiency was great. He had such a strong team that it kind of then reduces down his value on the impact rating. So that kind of bared out really nicely, and I'm like, all right, I think there's some strength to this, even though it's me cooking up a custom metric and it's very complicated. I think it
Yes.
works, and I think it's something that it's good for, at least for conversation, to kind of make an argument and talk through things.
You and Doug Orth should meet because you speak both the same stuff, the same language.
Yeah, I don't want
Unlike
to. I don't
you.
want to be too nerdy, and I hope it doesn't turn people off. But
Listen, I'm a nerd too.
okay, all
I'm
right,
a nerd.
good.
Yeah, I'm definitely a nerd. And I love, like I said, I love history. I love learning new stuff. And that's part of, this whole podcast, to learn more about you, to get to know you. And I'm like hands down. You have so much stuff that really impressive, really impressive. So, can you share some memorable experiences or stories from your time as a color commentator on DVD and Comcast Sportsnet Chicago?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was exciting. I remember
Yep.
when we landed the deal, it
Right?
would be a tape. It would be a tape delay broadcast, but because we were kind of, again, coming up, fledgling sport, and so I got to be the color commentator, and and I was excited. So I went to my friends at work, and I said, "Hey guys, you got to check this out. You got to watch this." But of course, MMA has sort of industry speak, and so there's a technique that's often referred to as a butt scoot.
Yeah.
It's a competitor rocks back onto his backside, puts his feet up defensively. So as I'm doing the commentary, I'm like, oh, he's back into the butt scoot, putting up his defenses. So my friends who watched the video are like, what? A butt scoot? I'm like, well, that's what it's called. So that was fun, kind of getting that response from them. But it was great, and I worked with some good guys in the announcer booth, and I knew the fighters really, passionately and closely because I'd been involved in it. So it felt really good to sort of have a chance to, as like I said, I like to talk and I've got a lot to say. So it was a great experience, and did it a lot on DVDs as well. So that was a good time.
I love that. Like, we were watching football this weekend, and I learned something about the slide, and I
Ah,
never heard it before. So you learn something every single day, which is really amazing. I can't. So this is something with you, with
right.
being a commentator on on the
Well, and
Sportsnet
and
Chicago.
and what's interesting, as a contrast, like at the time that I was doing MMA and I was commenting on it, there wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of following. There wasn't a lot of people into it yet. So I could be this kind of local expert.
Yes.
And
I
I that's how I
see.
got on television. Whereas now, getting involved in football, I mean, there's a full-fledged media industry. There's a social media industry that's way ahead of me in terms of its progression and people that are involved. And so everyone I'm talking to knows football at least as good as I do, or if not better. So it's an interesting dynamic being a content creator and contributor in with football, than it was back then when I was doing MMA, because I was like the absolute local resident expert on MMA at that time, and so I can speak
Right.
freely. But
Yeah.
now, I've got to make sure I've got my act together, and I'm really kind of vetting my data. And I've misstepped, and oh wait, let me double check that, guys, because there are a lot of really knowledgeable, really informed people, whether they're just fans or other content creators who are dialed in and have been watching football closely for decades, and they break it down and they look at that fantasy data that I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. So it's challenging but rewarding to be able to engage with sports talk on football in the social media space. I really enjoy it.
As an AV coordinator for events, what are some behind the scenes challenges that you yeah, like you went through, and what did you do to smooth the event operations and to ensure that they are going to be good at some
Yeah.
point?
So, and again, this is where relationships matter. Whether I mentioned earlier with the companies I worked at in medical device, but here
Yeah.
in MMA as well. So I was able to develop kind of a rapport and a connection with most of the big schools and fight clubs that we were involved with. So it was communicate early and often, and we had rules meetings and coordination meetings, and then
Yeah.
we broker arrangements if we were contracting the audiovisual stuff, or if we were going to be handling it ourselves. Like when I worked with Hook and Shoot, we handled all of our own AV activities. I did an event, Shoot a Hawaii. We had to use contractors to come in. It was at the Blaisdell Arena, which is like 6,000 seat venue. So that was those are there. It depends on what you're doing. It's exciting in different ways. So working with those contractors, working with our own production team, working with the group of competitors and participants to make sure everyone's in the right place at the right time. It's just that use those relationships, over communicate. To an extent you got to be firm, but you got to connect with them. And these are fighters at the time, so I'm not going to go push them around or intimidate them into place. So
I'm going
so
to work for you, Rich.
no, no. Oh yeah, yeah, I got you. Yeah, because I try to make it a good experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. You have to have like a good experience in your job so you can, keep it up and be happy with what you do. So, looking back at your career in the sports business and everything else, what are some of the standout moments or achievements that you cherish the most?
Um, so I mentioned the show we did in Las Vegas, where I was the licensed
Yeah,
matchmaker. That was a show we did at the Orleans Casino, which is a locals casino, but it was well put together. It was in the ballroom at the casino, which was in one of our nicest venues that I was able to participate in. And I had built a relationship with, you may be familiar with Bruce Buffer. He's the ring announcer for the UFC.
yeah,
So at the time, I had worked with him on an event that I coordinated and produced in Abu Dhabi called the Abu Dhabi Combat Club Submission Wrestling World Championships.
that's
So
insane.
I was a part of the production team back in like 2000 for that event, and Bruce was brought on as a ring announcer. And there was, I mean, hundreds of competitors because they were invited from all over the world for that event. And so he's like, I need help. So I got to work with him, feeding him like, hey, this guy was a World Cup champion. This guy's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. So he's got something to announce. So we built a nice little rapport. And so I worked for him. He ran a thing called maxfighting.com. And so I worked with him. I became the content editor and contributor. So then when we put the event together, I asked him if I can hire him, the one in Vegas. I said, hey, can I? And he's like, no, I can't. I got a contract at the UFC. I can't take a payday. He's like, but I could do it as a, pro bono. I'm like, you'll
Wow.
you'll announce for me for free? He's like, yeah. So he was my ring announcer for the event we did in Vegas. So that was fun having him just kind of be this. Oh, it's the UFC guy. And I remember during the event, he had come up to me and he goes, "Hey Richie," he goes, "Do you mind if I announce Floyd Mayweather?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, Floyd Mayweather's over here in the bleachers." I'm like, "Oh my God, yes, announce him, please."
Of
So I don't know how he wandered into our event. I don't know what happened, but there he was. He was sitting in the bleachers. So he announced him there. And then at that same show, Dana White, president of the UFC, had also kind of walked in. Probably wanted to see, hey, who's running a show in Vegas, but we were, nowhere near the scope or scale of the UFC. But he came to ringside. I went up and said, "Hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you." So it was just very cordial, very short. But that event was great. It was a great time. We had great fights in that show. We had those moments with some MMA celebrities and boxing celebrities, so that was a good time. Probably stands out as one of my best things I was involved with in my tenure with MMA.
So, did you go to Abu Dhabi or you never went to Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, so I went in 2000, and I was there with the production team. The Fight World Video Magazine was someone I also was. I did backstage interviews and ringside interviews and worked with them. And then the guy who ran Fight World got invited to produce the event, film it and everything, put it onto DVD set. So I was a part of the crew, got involved, and then we just kind of inherently got involved in rules meetings and coordinating and rules administration, all kinds of stuff. So it was a really great experience. Got to meet just fantastic people all over, the MMA world. And that's where I actually met the Japanese folks that I mentioned. I worked with Shudo.
Yeah.
I met them there. They were kind of geeked out that this American guy knew so much about Japanese fighting because I watched underground videos and whatnot. So that helped me connect with them. So I was in Abu Dhabi for a week. We ran the show. It was a great time. And then we got invited back in 2001. So I went for 2 weeks. And we again did production, helped run the event, coordinate, and so that is definitely something that I'll never forget. Going out there, spending time in a place in the globe that I would never go to otherwise. So that was something special.
Did you learn to talk Arabic?
No, no, no. Interestingly, I'm Italian. And so, and I was with one of my colleagues and my buddies. He's Chilean, so he's mostly Spanish. So we were on an elevator, and a guy walked in, started talking to us in Arabic, and we're like, no. And he's like, and I saw the Italian. He's like, oh, okay, because like, a little bit darker, kind of a prominent nose. He thought we were Arabic, and so like probably about 4 or 5 times throughout the visit, people would walk up to me and start talking in Arabic. I'm like, like,
I'm not.
yeah,
So Italian, we have a lot of common, especially in Lebanon, between Italian and Lebanese people,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they do think that we are Italian, or vice versa, and that's
right.
why you need to start talking Arabic. So I'm Lebanese and I speak Arabic.
Gotcha, gotcha.
I can teach you it.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, I love that you went to Abu Dhabi. It's a really beautiful country there. I never visited, but I would love to visit at some point.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah. So, with such a multifaceted career, how do you manage and balance your various roles and responsibilities?
So I've got a very patient wife. That's a big part of it.
It
Um,
is.
when I every step of the way, when I was doing MMA, I was still working in the medical device industry.
Mhm.
So, and I've got 3 kids. They're older now, so that even makes it a bit more easier. So balancing stuff is something I've done. So here I am now, sort of trying to stay involved, be involved in sports analytics and write for Blitz Sports Media, do my own thing on X, spend time with you. It's hard to carve out those times, but I think that's a story that a lot of social media pursuers are going through. You've got something that pays the bills. You're working in, whether it's a warehouse or you're in management or whatever it is you're doing, and you're trying to sneak in those times, do a podcast, get posts out, and so I, I appreciate everybody who does it. I want to give a shout out, if I can, to a couple of guys who I've worked
Of
with
course.
and met with. There's Son of Star Pod, Fun Football Pod, Shots from the Sideline, and a Rip. It's at Gambling 400. These are guys that I've kind of been in and around and worked with. Hot Take City, if you ever see some of these guys on there, they're all, everybody's all in, and they're making content and they're doing their thing. But we've all got, until we get that ESPN contract, or our hits become a million hits, we've got to have regular jobs. So I'm not alone. I'm not alone in the pursuit of this exciting, endeavor.
Yeah,
I'm sure you said you're a teacher, but here you are still doing things, trying to find the time. So, like I said, my wife is pretty patient. She knows I want to put a little bit of time into the content and get some stuff out.
I love
Um,
that.
it took me about a year to do goat, the goat running back video series. So I can probably get more efficient as I get better at video editing and content creation. So
Yeah,
maybe I can cut that down because I'm inexperienced. But still, I'm like, man, I want to do quarterbacks, I want to do receivers, I want to do tight ends, but the
it's a lot.
time to put that together is challenging.
Maybe the SA can help you. Like, maybe you can reach out to JC and the SA crew. They are amazing too, and they can help you maybe, with your challenges. And if the people that you mentioned want to be on my show, they are more than welcomed as well.
Very cool, very
So,
cool.
Yeah, I would love that. I would be honored. Let's talk a little bit, and especially that now you came new to X, and I'm not sure if you know a lot about the people that stepping in and saying hi to you, but we were talking on the side if you ever went to the expo. So, what's your intake into that? And are you planning this year to go to the expo? And did you ever heard of it?
I actually haven't heard of it. Yeah, I would love to go. I'm not sure if there's criteria or credentials or what you have to do, but like I said, I started my social media account last November. I didn't even have a Facebook, so I'm kind of green at all the things that are involved. But I would absolutely participate and go do that. And because, like I said, I've met a lot of people on X who are just great, but I've never met them personally. I don't know them to look at them necessarily. Maybe they got a podcast and I've seen them on their videos. But as you said, I always use my picture. It was something that my daughter had drawn years ago, so it just kind of became
Awesome.
my icon. Um, and I think she got it close. Got the balding and the got a facial fuzz, so she did fine. Um, but yeah, I would do that. I would absolutely do that. That would be great.
So the expo, it's really like a big a space to connect, to talk to people, and to put yourself out there. To like Greg Kellogg is here. He is an awesome person that you can connect with. Bob Lang does the expo. Bob Harris, I don't know. I think you heard of him. He's on Sirius XM. I had him last week.
Mm,
So there's a lot of people that you can connect with and get your your content to them. They can help you. Like there's big names in the industry and you don't even know that they are big names because they talk to everybody and they are so down to earth, which is really amazing. It's just such a huge deal. I've been 3 years going to the expo and this is my fourth year. I would love if you can manage to come.
yeah. I think that's something I got to pay attention to. And like I said, and I've been crawling forward and kind of like I got the blue check mark maybe a couple months ago. And it's just sort of like step by step. I'm working with Blitz Sports Media and continuing to
Yes.
write with them. We're closing out this football season, so we'll be ramping
Nice.
up. Getting ready for next year. I'm not sure if we're going to do much content in the off season. I don't know what Ryan and Brady have in mind. But
Yes.
so I'm just kind of finding my way, kind of getting connected. So I appreciate talking with you and getting some pointers on getting involved in the expo. That's great.
And Greg was saying to give his contact. So whenever we finish our podcast, if you can stay, and I can give you his phone number for sure, and you can connect with him.
I
He's a Hall
appreciate
of Famer, by the way. So
it.
he's such an amazing person and a great contact with everybody. So you will love him as well.
That's great.
So tell me about like what advice would you be giving someone who's looking to break into the sports business, whether in event production, commentary, analysis, or anything that you have experience with?
Yeah. Start young. It's much harder when you're older.
No, nope.
Um, but it at the end of the day, it's about the relationships, no matter what.
Agree.
I mean, there's a lot to learn from a technical standpoint, from an insider industry, the way things work. You're just pointing to me some people who can probably just blow my mind with all kinds of important information. So as much as information is out there and as much as the technical stuff about making content, you're going to learn it and you're going to get some progress through the people that you work with, who you interact with, who you talk to, who you get an idea from. That's the key. Work with people, generate relationships. And what you'll do too is you'll find out personalities are all over the shop. This is what I learned in MMA. Every kind of motivation, every kind of personality, people that maybe I normally wouldn't talk to, some people that I really, really loved and would wish were my best friends. But the point is, you learn about those people. You learn what their currency is to trade with and talk with, and how to
Yes.
to find a common goal, and you can work with someone, even if you don't really necessarily know them or care about them. Hey, I can work with so and so because this is what they can do, and this is what motivates them, and I can succeed with them. So build those relationships and figure out who can help you move the ball forward. Football reference, um, and go from there. So that would be get educated if you can. If you want to get into production, sports business, go to school, take classes, whatever. Get all that stuff. That's for sure. But then really focus on the relationships that could move things forward in a tangible way.
I agree 100%. So going back to a little bit for the matchmaker, what was the process like to become a licensed matchmaker with the Nevada Athletic Commission? And if someone needs advice, what advice can you give them if they are interested in pursuing this career?
Yeah. So what worked for me was because I'd already produced quite a few shows and had connections.
Yeah.
Um, I was able to provide video content of the stuff that I had done, and I had affidavit of people who can say, yeah, he's a professional, he knows. So that was I had an advantage because I was working within the industry already.
Yes.
So that would help if whatever it is you're doing, whether you're in the boxing world or if you're in MMA world and you're working with some kind of promoter or some other production house to do events, and you think that you've got an opportunity to get licensed as a matchmaker or even as an official. Um, Go online. Everything it's a government agency, so everything's available online. There's no secrets. You get the forms. There's instructions, and work with those colleagues who hopefully they've got establishment with the Nevada Athletic Commission. Like when I was the matchmaker, there was a promoter who ran Tough Enough Promotions, Barry. God bless him, he was a great guy. So he was already a licensed promoter. So that helped me then connect myself with him and get that license put together. So that's really kind of where it's at. Again, it goes back to that theme of relationships. Who do you know? How can you get things done?
That's awesome. So you're a writer as well, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
what kind of writing do you do? Is it all like sports related, or you have something else in mind, or something that's coming in the future?
Yeah, currently it's all sports. I'm
Mhm.
writing exclusively with like Blitz Sports Media, so I try to get about one piece a week. There's some weeks that lag for a couple of weeks, but I'll try to get one piece a week. I like to do some kind of breakdown, find an interesting topic. I've done stuff on who's the most overvalued, who's the most underrated. What does Bryce Young need to have happen in order for him to succeed? Just kind of topics that catch my attention. I recently wrote a piece that I just got it out today about Jordan Love. Is he overrated? Because of course, there's always an overreaction when the most recent thing happens. And so he had a really rough game against Philadelphia. Didn't look so good out there. So the overreaction is always overrated. He's a bum. So I'm like, wait a minute, is he overrated? So I did an article. I said, what does it mean to be overrated? Break that down. Now let's
Yeah.
compare him to those criteria. Is he overrated? I just put that out, and so it's a wide range of stuff that I like to write about, but it's football related. I used to do some poker writing. I had a blog that I did. I was big into poker for a while, and so I did that. So I've always liked to do creative writing.
Yes.
Um,
I love
so
those.
so right now there's a nice, and like I said, I wrote for MMA. I wrote maxfighting.com. I got an article in Grappling Magazine. So it's just been something I like to do, and so this opportunity with Blitz was just great for me to jump in and be able to exercise those muscles. I can use the data, the analytics. Kind of a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, I wrote an article and I sent it to my buddies." And he sent me a picture because I built a couple of little small metrics. One was called um, no, I can't even think what the metric was called, but it basically was one minus pocket time divided by pressure rate. And he's looking, he goes, "You lost me. That's it. I'm out. I'm out." He was done with the article at that point, you know.
I'm done. Oh my God, Rich. I really don't want to stop the show. We are over an hour, and I'm so happy and excited, and maybe I'll get you on the show another time because you have so much to share with everybody. But I do have one more question.
Gotcha.
So in the show, every time I have a guest,
Hmm.
I ask them to share something that they never shared with anybody else, either a secret or something from their early age that they never spoke of. What are you going to share with us tonight?
Wow. Do I have anything interesting to say?
Oh my God, you're all interesting.
Why, but I blabber about everything, so everyone knows everything. I don't know if there's
You,
anything, some kind of
that's
secret,
amazing.
secret thing. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm going to disappoint you. I can't. Nothing comes to mind that's very interesting. I'll just say
We're
this.
gonna
I mean,
call the wife. We're gonna call the wife, Rich.
yeah. Well, I can. I guess if something that maybe people in the football social media circle don't know about me, I've got. I'll just say this: I've got three wonderful kids, and I've got a beautiful wife, and I wouldn't be able to do anything at all if it weren't for the strength that my family gives.
That's amazing. That's the best answer ever, Rich. That's the best answer ever. I love that. So, thank you so much for coming in tonight, Rich. I really appreciate your time and your dedication for everything that you do. You seem so successful, and you have the heart to put, your love and care into everything in your work. So, before I conclude,
Hmm.
please inform our audience on how they can connect with you and your social media presence.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So yeah, I'm says me at says me underscore excuse me says underscore me one. So that's the handle, and says me is the leader on that. You can also go to says underscore me at YouTube, and that's where I've got the GOAT running back video series. So those are the main platforms where I'm out there. I'd love for you to, any and everybody, go check out the videos. It was a passion project. I want to share it with everyone. And then on X, if you want to catch up, say anything, ask me anything. I'll even put together a little analytical piece for you if you got something you'd like to know. Again, it says me at says underscore me one.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of the Game Changers. We hope our discussion with Rich, aka Says Me, provided valuable insights into his experience in the realm of fantasy football. Please join me for the next episode on Wednesday, January 29th, featuring Leo Siga as my special guest. I would like to express my appreciation to Evan Iggy JC and the TSA team for their ongoing support and for facilitating this platform for sharing authentic stories like Rich tonight. Special thanks for JC for his essential contribution behind the scenes. I encourage you to subscribe for the podcast and leave a review, as your feedback is key for our improvement and outreach. Follow us on social media for updates on upcoming episodes and to become part of our community, the Sports Affiliation, where everyone is welcome. Until next time, continue challenging the game and leaving your mark. This is Rich and Carla signing off. Have a blessed evening.
Bye bye.